All right, welcome to the Explainer. If you are a BS accountancy student staring down the Management Advisory Services section of the LXCPA, listen up, because this is your ultimate study guide. Today, we're mastering activity-based costing, or ABC for short. But look, we aren't just going to memorize some formulas only to completely forget them by tomorrow. We're going to use the Feynman technique here. We'll break this down so simply that you'll retain this knowledge for the next 3 years straight into your board exams. So grab your notes, put your phone on Do Not Disturb, and let's decode how modern companies actually figure out where their money is going.
I want you to picture this scenario for a second. There's a company named Classic Brass, and they make these luxury yacht stanchions. They have just hit absolute record high sales. The marketing team, they're thrilled, popping champagne. But when the president looks at the income statement, there is a massive problem. For the very first time in company history, they're bleeding red ink. They've suffered a net loss. So the natural question is, why? Are competitors undercutting them? Are materials suddenly way too expensive? Nope. The hidden culprit causing this massive cognitive dissonance is actually a horribly distorted traditional costing system. It is literally feeding management terrible data.
Let's get right into it with Section 1, Why Traditional Costing Fails. Okay, let's dive into this and expose the fatal flaw of the traditional costing system. You know, the one you've probably spent your entire last semester learning about. To pass the board exams, you absolutely must understand this fundamental difference. Traditional costing systems take these massive amounts of overhead and just spread them evenly across all products, usually based on something like direct labor hours. It's kind of like spreading peanut butter blindly over a piece of toast. But here's the thing. Modern companies are highly automated. Direct labor is just a tiny fraction of their total costs. Activity-based costing, on the other hand, acts like a scalpel. It purposefully allocates costs based strictly on a cause and effect relationship. Basically, if a product doesn't consume the resource, it doesn't get hit with the cost. Make sense?
Moving right along to Section 2, Building the ABC Dream Team.
You can't just run an ABC system from a spreadsheet while hiding in the accounting basement. Setting this up isn't just some boring math exercise, it is a major organizational shift. Let's look at how you actually build the corporate task force required to make this whole thing work. There are 3 essential characteristics of a successful ABC implementation. First off, you absolutely need top management support to motivate employees to actually embrace the change. Second, management has to link the ABC data to how people are evaluated and rewarded. If they don't do that, employees will just stick to the old system. And third, you must form a cross-functional team. The accounting department alone literally cannot do this. You need marketing, you need production, and you need engineering representatives, simply because they actually understand the intimate details of the daily operations.
And this brings us to a quote that brilliantly illustrates a really common trap for accountancy students. For the LECPA, knowing these team dynamics is just as highly testable as knowing the mathematical formulas. If an exam question asks why an ABC system failed, look for the choice that says the accountants tried to do it in isolation. Without the engineers there to explain how machines are set up or the production managers to explain batch processing, the accountants are really just guessing in the dark.
Which brings us to Section 3, Step 1, Defining Activity Pools.
So you've got your cross-functional dream team assembled. Awesome. Now we transition to the actual mechanics of the ABC framework. The very first step is organizing all of that messy corporate chaos into clear, measurable categories. To lock this into your long-term memory for the boards, I want you to visualize a literal bucket. An activity cost pool is just a bucket where we throw specific overhead costs that relate to a single activity measure. We're basically going to take that massive, confusing cloud of factory overhead and neatly sort it into several specific buckets.
Let's look at this framework straight from the Classic Brass case. Notice how logically these activity cost pools pair up with their activity measures. The customer orders bucket is driven directly by the number of customer orders. The product design bucket, driven by the number of product designs. This is the foundational architecture of your ABC system. Every single dollar of overhead has to find its proper bucket.
Let's keep the momentum going with Section 4, Step 2, First Stage Allocation.
Let's see how this builds into what is easily the most heavily tested part of this entire explainer. Step 2, the first stage allocation. This is where the actual money starts moving. Now, if you want to remember this for the next 3 years, let's strip away all the fancy jargon. First stage allocation is simply moving the money from the company's general ledger over into our ABC buckets. The general ledger naturally organizes things by functional departments, like the production department or marketing department. Our job is to extract that overhead and distribute it across our activity pools based on what actually caused the cost in the first place.
Take a look at these overhead numbers just sitting in the general ledger right now. We've got $500,000 in indirect factory wages, $300,000 in equipment depreciation, and so on. Now, notice a huge exam trap here. Are you paying attention? We purposefully exclude direct materials and direct labor from this list. Why? Because direct costs are already easily traced straight to the product. ABC exists solely to solve the mystery of overhead. Remember that. We do not put direct costs into the first stage allocation.
Next up, Section 5, the employee interview secret.
So we have this massive pool of indirect factory wages and several different buckets to put it in. How on earth do we actually figure out what percentage goes where? This brings us to a highly practical, real-world method that examiners absolutely love to test. We don't just sit around in a boardroom and guess. No way. We go down to the factory floor. We allocate these indirect costs by interviewing the employees who actually have first-hand knowledge of the activities. Your cross-functional team will literally interview the supervisors and the quality inspectors, asking them directly, hey, what percentage of your time is spent dealing with customer orders versus product design?
So the crucial point here is the stark contrast between how we handle these two types of costs. Direct costs are economically and easily traced straight to a physical product. You know exactly how much wood went into building a desk, right? But indirect costs, like a factory supervisor's salary, are virtually impossible to trace physically. They have to be allocated to our activity cost pools using those percentage estimates we just gathered from our employee interviews.
Let's apply this right back to our classic brass story. The cross-functional team went down there and interviewed the indirect factory workers. After analyzing their daily routines, the workers estimated that exactly 25% of their total time and resources was consumed solely by processing customer orders. Now, we just execute the math. We go back to our general ledger, which showed $500,000 in indirect factory wages. We simply multiply that $500,000 by the 25% estimate we got from our interviews. That equals $125,000. So that exact amount is allocated or dropped right into the customer orders activity cost pool bucket. You do this exact same process for every single overhead cost across every single bucket, and boom, you have successfully completed the first stage allocation.
Finally, Section 6, LECPA Bullet Review and Hacks. You have just learned the core mechanics of designing an ABC system. Now let's shift into pure exam prep mode. It is time to literally screenshot your brain, utilize some active recall, and lock in the most testable concepts for your management advisory services exams. What's really interesting here is that these exact phrases appear repeatedly in board exam multiple choice questions. If they ask about accumulating costs, look for the cost pool. If they ask about an implementation failure, remember you need a cross-functional dream team backed by top management support. When tracing money from the general ledger to the pools, that's your first stage allocation, and it's driven by employee interviews. And the ultimate trap to avoid, say it with me, never, ever include direct materials or direct labor in your first stage overhead allocation. I'm going to leave you with this active recall challenge to really cement your learning today. If a company's sales are booming but profits are tanking, what is their costing system hiding? Take a moment later today to explain this answer out loud to yourself or maybe a classmate using the Feynman technique we talked about. If you can confidently explain how a traditional system spreads costs like peanut butter and how an ABC system uses cross-functional teams and first-stage allocation to fix it, you are well on your way to conquering the LECPA. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep studying smart.